an anti-interesting event.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this every Wednesday, sort of. Live, 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv. If you'd like to support this project, you can do so at patreon.com/Echoplex or at eplex.store. People at the $5 level get the entire recording of this sent to you a day early, and you get like way more content than you get on the podcast feed. I'm producer Dave, and you can find me on Grindr. A little bit of housekeeping. First of all, we're excited to announce that the first episode of Used to Be a Spy is available now. I did that with the Media Wench and the Councilman, and it was great. It came out great. The Media Wench and the Councilman were better at that than I was, because they're a little more into TV. But I held it down. It was really good. You can find that on all your favorite podcatchers, and I may throw in the first episode of that up on this feed, as well as the Plex and the Down Ballot feed in the coming week, just to kind of get everybody over there. Another piece of housekeeping. Next week will actually be the last week of the weekly show for Intellectual Dollar Tree. Things will still occasionally get published to the feed, like if Eric Weinstein does something incredibly crazy or stupid, or I don't know, if there's something that we do during Red Light on one of the other shows that's appropriate, it'll go up on that feed. But we won't be doing this as a weekly live show anymore after next week. We're trying to plan what we're going to do next week for the last show, because we figured we should do something a little special and not just watch a dumb video. But who knows, maybe we'll just watch a dumb video and go out of this like we came into this. It's been real and it's been fun, but the IDW has become so mainstream, and these ideas have sort of infested our society in such a way that it's not really even a niche piece of niched area anymore. It's just the most popular stuff on YouTube, and for what it's worth, the IDW as a group of people has largely fallen apart. They no longer call themselves that, or have any sort of a cohort of people that they sort of have in that space. HK is not going away. So H himself is not going away. He'll be here next week, and he's working on actually a new project. He'll be doing a solo project that some of us will probably be on going forward on Echoplex Media. He'll probably be streaming actually in the morning, and whatever it is will go out as a podcast. We haven't figured out what it's going to be yet, but hopefully he finds he figures out something that works for everyone. And you'll be seeing him here sometimes on Wednesdays, probably anyway, just because it's habit. And Wednesday nights on stream, we'll still probably be going over some of these ghouls. But I have another show that I want to launch. It's another podcast. I want to do the cast of characters. And I might be doing research for the Cast of Characters show live here. And, you know, we'll see what's up. We'll see what's up. The stream schedule isn't really changing. It's just that the IDW has run its course, as has this podcast. This has been our most popular podcast endeavor. And I do want to thank everybody on the podcasts and everybody in the live feeds and stuff who checks this out. We grew a lot on our other stuff and whatnot because of the intellectual Dollar Tree. And hopefully our Cast of Characters show will bring us to yet another new audience. Now, with all that done, what we're going to do this week is watch a dumb video. This might be the dumbest video because this is Tim Pool on Triggernometry.
What do you make of where we are at the moment? What's your take?
Do I have to say it? Civil War! We're tracking over the past several years that we are in a period of
I
civil
wonder if Constantine and Non Oliver are going to get annoyed with Tim Pool.
Civil strife is defined academically as 70 or more political deaths per year. We have 30 in the first few months. In times of war...
70. Wait, what if you only have 80 people in your population? If there's 80 people in your population, then you're not even have civil to be unrest. I would assume that this would be like per capita, right? Per 100,000, per million people. You can't just go with 70. There's like a lot of countries with a lot more people than in the United States, and a lot of countries with a lot fewer people in the United States.
Which are outside what our principles purport to be.
But we're not in the time of war.
And it's also
Are
as
we?
well, Tim.
No.
No, we're not.
What I'm saying is you're extending the definition of war, wartime, and emergency in order to suit your agenda, is what it sounds like.
You are incorrect.
Oh no, is Constantine going to go after Tim? Oh, dude, we might be watching the end of this. We might be watching the beginning of these people fucking turning on Tim Pool. I purposefully did not watch the Majority Report hit on this because I knew I was going to run this, but I wonder what Sam and Co thought of this.
Tim Pool, welcome to Triggernometry.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor and a privilege.
It's great to have you on, man. It's an interesting time with a lot going on. You know, people are burning Teslas down, all kinds of crazy shit is going on. What do you make of where we are at the moment?
It used to be that the Tesla burned itself down.
Say it?
I mean, that's the point of the show.
Civil War!
Oh, you love that shit. This is one of the things
I don't love it. I just think I'm reading and paying attention and studying. And I don't even go as far as, are you familiar with Rudyard Lynch?
No.
He's got a big YouTube channel, What If Alt History. He's a very smart guy. He seems a little bit autistic. I think he said that. And he predicted...
Wait, what? What?
1,000 people would be dead from the point of the election to the beginning of April. And we had him on my show, and I said, that's not going to happen. I think we're at like 30 deaths, politically motivated, since the election. And there's wild stories, like a guy killed his family and he was screaming about Trump or something like that. He thought 1,000 people. He's done a bunch of analysis.
I wonder what he defines as political deaths, because I bet he doesn't count folks killing queer people as political deaths.
He's done many videos.
Like you have to like hold up your gun and yell Kamala forever for this guy to think it's a political action.
Breaking down various civil wars, periods of tumult. It's not that he's hyper focused on conflict. It's that what we are seeing in the United States tracks alongside in very similar ways what happened to a lot of other countries pre-revolution, pre-Civil War, or even international conflict.
What do you mean by that? Like, what do you see? What are the markers that make you think that that's the path that America's on?
So when it comes to me saying Civil War, and I do so quite a bit, I don't do so the most, but I have a high-profile show, so people tend to equate it to me. My analysis is actually just I read news stories and then I agree or disagree.
Well, good for you. Me too. I read news and agree or disagree.
That asked a bunch of national security experts and...
But wait a minute. If it's the news and it's just like hard news and you're just being told what happened, that's not really a place for you to agree or disagree. I don't know.
What the likelihood of a civil war in the United States would be. And the consensus, I think, was 30% in the next 10 years. But some individuals said over 90. So the view among academics is the precursor to civil war a period is known as a civil strife period. Civil strife doesn't always lead to civil war. The American Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s was a period of civil strife, not civil unrest. Civil strife is defined academically as 70 or more political deaths per year. We have 30 in the first few months. Depending on how you want to define it, you could argue a little bit more, a little bit less. we're tracking over the past several years that we are in a period of civil strife. I counter that with we have a denser population. Denser population means a higher hard number, but less per capita. So I don't know if that will be perfect. But
even Tim Pool, because that's dumb. Again, like France has less people in the U.S.
Things to consider. Back when Trump got elected, we were dealing with a bifurcation in American culture starting probably at the end of the 2000s with the emergence of new media. It was apparent to people who were born on the internet, who grew up on the internet, and the people who lived in the mainstream corporate press world. I had been saying since back then, we are seeing a divergent reality. Scott Adams articulated it much better than I with one screen, two films. So now
The Dilbert guy?
the markers are obviously political violence in the street, advocacy for extreme violence and terror in the press among a prominent faction, and administrative civil war, as Eric Weinstein called it. All of these things have basically shown that the dam that is holding back the floods of conflict are on the verge of exploding. So if we go back to Donald Trump's first term, you had the street level violence with Antifa. If any conservative Trump group tried,
Like they just show up? I don't like this. So the anti-fascists were out there most of the time because the Proud Boys were out there. That's like why they were out there.
organizing, they were brutalized in the street. There was no inverse of this until the emergence of the Proud Boys.
Wait, what? No, you've got this. I mean, there were always anti-fascists, sure. And like in the 80s or whatever, in the punk scene, there were the Sharps. And what we know today is Antifa, like, is, you know, that some of that contributed to it. But what does he mean? Like, there was no, does he just mean anti-Trump protests?
A free speech rally was held, advocating for the right to speak up in public. What happened? Far leftists, many aligned with Antifa as their, banner or whatever, showed up through explosives. I mean, this is 2017 or 18. They're throwing explosives at elderly women. I was there. There's a
who was throwing explosives at elderly women?
And
is the cops? Maybe the cops?
It explodes and she falls over, and the crowd's screaming. One guy came with a bike lock, a U-lock, and he bashed several people over the head with it. These were not conservatives doing this. That level of street violence ends up with Donald Trump. He's accused of being a Russian spy, literally targeted by elements of our own intelligence agencies. So you have prominent media personalities defending the violence in the streets. You have violence in the streets, and you have the administrative state targeting the president at the time. Those things were all still very much on the.
So this is really strange because his timeline is kind of fucked up too, because he's like, oh, it seemed like they did a free speech rally or whatever, and well, the Proud Boys were at that, whatever it was. If it was in 2017, 2018, whatever it was, the Proud Boys were at that. So if this is an inciting event, the Proud Boys showed up first.
So at the time, we saw several articles. There's a Princeton professor, there's a CIA analyst, there's Stephen Marsh, who's a journalist and researcher, more of a liberal persuasion, and you had this article in The Atlantic and a bunch of ancillary articles that emerged outside of it, asking the question of, is this how civil war starts? Nobody wants to believe it. Nobody wants to pay attention. And so at the time, I had been saying to people, guys, do you think there's any veracity to this? I was part of a chat group with a bunch of different journalists in DC, and they all mocked the idea and said, don't be stupid. People fighting in the street all the time. There's protests all the time. And I said, yes, but it's the presidency. They were accusing the president of being a spy for a foreign government, effectively a traitor.
But that's okay. So he's like fucking conflating a bunch of stuff here, right? He's conflating anti-fascist action and like community organizing in the street that sometimes, unfortunately ended up in street fights where people got hurt. He's conflating that with like the press and to some extent the intelligence apparatus trying to figure out what was going on with the Trump campaign and potential connections to the Russian intelligence services. These are like distinct things that don't have anything to do with each other and they could happen discreetly from one another. There's no reason that these things had to happen together. In fact, they weren't even really happening in concert in any sort of meaningful way, unless he's saying that like the pussy hat like protests that happen in almost every city were some kind of Antifa or like Black Bloc organized thing that was also somehow put in place by the media and the U.S. intelligence services, which makes no sense. The
penalty of which is death. Like, this is a crazy thing to attack a president with. And most people poo-pooed the idea. Think about how far we've gone since 2017, 2018 to where we are now. So a few examples. The first thing I want to say is the American Civil War started with the Battle of Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Several states, seven.
Oh shit! Jim Lee's
Abraham Lincoln
ancestor
was
started
as
it.
president. He won the election. 7 states, slave states, said this man is going to abolish slavery, which will damage our economy, and we have a right to own slaves. Blah blah blah. So we are seceding now. Abraham Lincoln didn't obviously want the Union to break apart, so they tried to maintain federal military bases in Southern Territory. Notably, in South Carolina, there's Fort Sumter. The Union occupied it. South Carolina said, we are no longer part of your Union. Take your troops and go. The North said, no, we won't do that. So the South shows up with a bunch of ships. It's considered the first battle of the Civil War, despite the fact that no one killed each other. One guy died. It was an accident. Historically, we say Civil War began on that day. However, at the time, nobody thought a Civil War had started. So when the first Battle of Manassas occurred, which
I think as soon as the fucking South seceded, a lot of people thought that a civil war was either like had either started or was imminent.
or so miles from where we're sitting today.
But I don't know. I wasn't there.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, you're in Washington, D.C.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
You had Confederate forces amassing on the South, and then you had Union forces amassing on the North, and people picnicked. They showed up to enjoy the show with a nice picnic and laugh. Laugh about how there's no Civil War and it can't happen.
Did people show? Wait, what? Did people? There was like a standoff, and people showed up with a picnic to what? I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time believing this. This doesn't sound like one of those things that's true.
It was a massacre. And the historical depiction of what occurred as people are running around freaking out, civilians are getting their heads blown off because people were standing on a hillside as the war was erupting in full swing. Interestingly, the Confederacy won the Battle of Bull Run, and if they had marched on D.C., the war would have been over and the Confederacy would have won. But this is a really
Wait, what?
good example because
That's not.
anybody listen.
You don't. The Civil War in the United States wouldn't have ended if after the first battle the Confederate Army marched to D.C. and took over the Capitol. That would have been the beginning of the. That wouldn't have ended the Civil War. The South wouldn't have just won. It's not like capture the flag. A Civil War has never been capture the flag.
Listening right now can go and read Fort Sumter started the Civil War, and then no one believed it. So the question is, are we in it now and we just don't believe it? I can't believe that after all of this time, with the escalation of administrative conflict, 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump, an attempt by one political faction to put him in prison, impeach him, and the fact that in multiple jurisdictions, they have criminally charged Trump's lawyers, which is so far beyond what the Constitution allows.
No, it's if your lawyer breaks the law, whether or not it's in the context of them trying to defend you against a criminal case, your lawyer is criminally liable if they break the law. They don't just get a whoopsie poopsie because they're your lawyer.
And they argue they're justified in doing so, but it's ludicrous. No one on the right has exercised power to that degree in any way. Trump's not invoked the Insurrection Act in his first term to stop the riots. Trump didn't order federal authorities to go round up these far-left extremists. Trump didn't order U.S. attorneys during his first term to start arresting lawyers and journalists or anything like this. When Trump gets out of office, they continue to pursue him, accuse him of insurrection, lie about what happened on January 6th.
They did not lie, but like what lies? Like the J6 report. I didn't read the whole thing. I'll be honest, but like the parts of it that I did read and stuff, they downplayed a lot of it. It was pretty mild, a pretty mild description of what happened.
And then started criminally charging his lawyers, notably Jenna Ellis, who I'm not a big fan of. She cried on camera saying, "I'm so sorry for working with Donald Trump." Mm-hmm. She's just a lawyer. What was she accused of? She drafted letters for the president, which is a legally, constitutionally protected service.
But what were the lawyer? No, she's the one who drafted the letters to the states, I believe, saying that they should replace their electors with fake electors. This just following orders shit doesn't work. You can't just be like, I'm just following orders if you're a member, if you're like an attorney. You're not only a member of the bar association, but you're essentially like an officer of the court if you're an attorney. And you can't just go around fucking doing shit that's illegal because you work for the president. That doesn't protect you. That's the person who should know the most that, hey, this is illegal and I can't do that.
You can't criminally charge lawyers. Everyone's entitled to have a lawyer.
Right. You know, but that lawyer can then, what do you think that after you criminally charge the lawyer, that's the only one? No, that lawyer then goes and gets a lawyer.
Georgia. And they tried to put her in prison for decades under RICO charges, claiming that because she represented Trump, she was involved in a criminal conspiracy. So when you get...
No, wait a minute. There were other people who were attorneys for Donald Trump who weren't charged with anything because they weren't involved in trying to twist the arms of the state representatives or the state governments to overturn the election.
We will burn you to the ground if you like. We're going to take your lawyers away from you. We're going to put your legal team, your supporters, Giuliani, Manafort. I mean, this has been going on for nearly a decade. So the period before the American Civil War...
Wasn't Giuliani charged with a bunch of shit that didn't really have anything to do with Donald Trump?
7 years of bloody conflict in the territory of Kansas as people fought over whether it would be a slave state or a free state. There was administrative conflict in the non-warring territories. It wasn't a civil war, but people have been talking about it for a long time. You end up getting the famous caning in Congress, where I believe it was a Southerner caned a Northerner. I think it was a Northern Republican was beaten and got a TBI. It's nuts. So that violence had existed. Today, we've evolved from the far left shows up and beats the crap out of right wingers to the far left rampages around the country in mass rioting, firebomb. How do you say this? May 29th, 2020, far left for extremists to the tune of about 1,000 showed up in front of the White House throwing firebombs. They firebombed the White House grounds. They firebombed.
I'm sorry, did the firebombs? I'm sorry, did he watch the same fucking protests that I did in 2020 when they were in front of the White House? This was either after or right before Donald Trump had the National Guard clear everybody off of the National Mall so he could hold a Bible in front of a church. I don't know if it was immediately before or immediately after. The firebombing? What is he firebombing? I didn't think they had any Molotovs. I don't think they threw any Molotovs at the White House or anything like that. Does he mean like they threw the tear gas back at the cops? Like, I don't know what he's talking about here. And we covered that. We watched a lot of that. I was up late at night. I was up late watching some of that stuff.
Bombed St. John's Church. They injured over 100 law enforcement officers, ripped the barricades down. And then Trump and Bill Barr sent in police to break it up. Had they not done that, far leftists would have stormed the White House. But Trump said, we're not going to let him do it.
Wait, what? How do you know
They
that?
insulted Trump in the media. They called him Bunker Boy because he was forced to flee to an emergency bunker. Now I'd just like to play this game. Every step of the way we've had this conversation on, is the United States moving towards civil war? I don't know that it is. I'm just some guy who reads the news. I've asked people this question.
No, you're not some guy who you are the primary like promoter of the idea that the United States is going to be in a civil war.
We went back, insert any number of years, and told someone what we are seeing today would happen, would they believe you? The answer is no. If I went back to 2016 and said 4 years from now, we will see the worst riots in this country in 50 years with 30 plus deaths, 1,000 plus people in DC will firebomb the White House and St. John's Church across the street, forcing the president.
Okay, the church didn't get, nothing happened. Nothing happened to the church. And this idea that they firebombed the White House is absurd. This is absurd.
To flee to an underground bunker with the security personnel, they would have laughed in my face. And I know this because they did. In 2018, when the stories were bubbling up, the response I got from the journalists in DC, not that I was saying, it's civil war is coming, oh my God. I said, do you guys think these articles are legit? There's a Princeton professor saying it's coming. They'd say, it'll...
So now you like Princeton professors?
Impossible. The security state wouldn't allow it. Ryan Long, comedian, comes on my show in 2020. And we talked about some of the latest updates and what was going on. I mean, we had the Summer of Love riots. And we discussed civil war.
Because I love that they have their own headcanon about what happened in the uprisings after the murder of George Floyd.
I view this as a gotcha. Though Ryan's a friend, he's we think he's great. So we're hanging out before the show. He's talking to me, and everything's fine. And then right when the show starts, he pulls a gotcha where he goes, "Where's the Civil War, Tim?" Last time I was here, you told me there was going to be a civil war, and I left kind of freaking out. And I went, on January 6, 2021, 1,000 Donald Trump supporters stormed the Capitol of the United States, smashing windows and climbing through the building, disrupting the electoral vote count.
1,000? Donald Trump said it was 1 million. It wasn't no million, but it wasn't 1,000 either. I don't know how many people actually entered the Capitol grounds, but it looked like more than 1,000 people had entered the building.
Many other people on the other side of the building walked in as the doors were opened. They called that an insurrection. And he went, oh.
So they didn't. So here's like the way this went down was I hate having to do this stuff. The way this went down was that the Capitol Police were way outnumbered, right? And so they either had to fall back and try to figure out how to like gain control of the situation, or they faced being fucking murdered by a mob. And so they kept falling back. And one of the times they fell back, yeah, they left a gate. They left like a barricade, and the people walked through the barricade. Those people were like trying not to get killed. So they were obviously like trying to negotiate with the crowd and not get killed. I don't know. What were they supposed to do? What were they supposed to do? Are they supposed to just fucking open fire? I mean, that shit would have been a disaster. I'm glad that like in the Capitol Police and the DC Police as well, that like cooler heads prevailed and they didn't open fire on the crowd. What kind of world would we be living in now if they opened fire on that crowd? What would have happened?
The left right now is arguing that Donald Trump tried to overthrow this country with a violent coup of his supporters that he called for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, I mean, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but sure, yeah. If you believe in the idea of stochastic terrorism, then this isn't really a difficult statement to make or a difficult statement to defend.
A riot at a government building, which was extremely bad. There was no real functional plan that Trump or anybody had to remove the government.
Yeah, it wasn't an attempt to seize power.
Right, it's silly.
There were people in there looking for lawmakers. They're like, "Where's Nancy?" People were saying to hang Mike Pence and shit. I don't be liking Mike Pence. There were people there who had a plan. There were like the 3%ers, and I think some other militia groups had a plan. But the problem is that none of the other people there were following them. Well, the problem for them was, right, most of the people that got inside the building just got in there and they just did it for the gram. They just took pictures of themselves. They did it to be a face and a name and like a right-wing influencer. If they would have been more organized, we'd be having a different conversation right now.
Dom, silly, I think, is probably understating the case. It was not a good thing to happen.
I'm saying the argument that Trump organized a military takeover with no weapons is silly.
That idea is silly. It was not a good thing to happen, as you say.
It was one of the darkest days of this country in modern history.
Right.
And I've routinely called for those that rioted to go to prison. I just think that 4 years in prison for a riot's probably good enough, and now we can bring some of these people home.
Tim, you've outlined your case, and it's very persuasive. I would argue that you're missing a crucial and fundamental part, which is COVID. COVID essentially locking people down, putting them in their houses for X amount of months, watching their businesses go to the wall, become incredibly frustrated and angry, deservedly so. Spend all day, every day, mainlining social media into your eyeballs is enough to send anyone a little...
Yeah, but that's when your show got popular, Non-Oliver. That's when you guys blew up.
Me and all of us here included.
And I think what ends up happening with COVID is more people plugged in to the political entertainment element.
Yes.
You're locked in your house, and what happens? We saw podcast numbers through the roof. I mean, it was nuts. My channels were getting a combined 150 million views per month. Arguably one of the biggest. It's not a single show. It was like a series of clips on YouTube plus 2 podcasts.
Yeah.
So what happens is people with nothing to do, they turn to YouTube, they turn to social media. Their life is being destroyed specifically by a political environment. So a large portion turn to a political entertainment. Those people have maintained that. COVID exacerbated the problem.
Yeah.
It enraged people and it activated people. So people who normally wouldn't pay attention, all of a sudden now are wired into politics. This is why Donald Trump did not win in 2020. So I told Steve Bannon this. A friend of mine, I've known since I was a kid, couldn't tell you what Supreme Court justice meant. he would think it's some kind of term for accountability. He wouldn't realize you're talking about people. He filmed himself carrying a mail-in ballot with his phone, filming it as he walked to the mailbox and said, "I'm doing my part. Are you?" And he put his mail-in ballot in. And as soon as I saw that, I said, Trump lost. I was telling my friends, I was like, yo, when you get homie who doesn't know left from right in politics or up from down, and he's filming himself doing this.
Yeah.
But that's great that you're just calling, assuming that this is true, you're just calling your friend like uninformed. And maybe your friend is more informed than you think he is. He just doesn't want to listen to you talk about this shit, and so he doesn't talk to you about it.
I was like, I don't know how Trump wins. And the problems of COVID were largely viewed as Trump's fault because most people don't pay attention to the nuances of what was going on. And look, let's be real, Trump was president. What I see now, when people say, it's remarkable. I had this conversation with someone recently. They said, it's not going to happen. There's not going to be a civil war. And I'm like, my dude, have you not seen enough over the past 8 years to consider perhaps reading about the Spanish Civil War, the Russian Revolution, the American Civil War, and to consider maybe you're right, it won't happen?
What do you think Tim has read about these things? I'm not like super booky or whatever. I don't read a lot of books. I should read more, probably. I read like articles and stuff so I know what I'm talking about on the show generally. But like, I don't think this guy's like reading like histories of like past conflicts in his spare time. I think he's like having sushi and skating with the boys.
Long probability, I'm not saying more than 50%, that it can. For instance, today we're not dealing with wanton violence through the streets. We're dealing with around 20 direct swattings targeting individuals. This is now an effort of largely leftist individuals now terrorizing the right intentionally, where in 2020 it was anger and street violence and firebombs.
Just for people who are not clued in, the swatting is when someone calls up the police and says, there's an emergency happening at this house. The SWAT team arrives, kicks down the door potentially, etc. And it's an attempt, A, to make that person potentially get killed by the SWAT team, or to make them feel very unsafe.
Like who got swatted? Who's he talking about?
Or to create a situation, as you explained before.
I think swatting, I don't think it's generally political. I think it's almost always personal.
Whereby the police stop coming, and then that person is actually unsafe because their house
exactly.
can be...
So a lot of people need to understand, we get swatted all the time, nonstop. Famously, we had this one year where we got swatted 15 times, and we were tracking them because they were minor disruptions. The first one disrupted the show. We had to get up and leave. After that, we conferred with security, and usually it was fine. There was one credible bomb threat. We had the bomb squad come out twice. I'm not going to explain the tactics they use to force this to happen, but you can. It's relatively easy for these people who know how to do it. We still get swatted, but we've mitigated it. So now we don't there's no reason to talk about it. It doesn't affect us anymore. One of the reasons they do it is also to strain resources. So when Owen Schroyer of InfoWars is forced to walk out of his house backwards, they wake him up in the middle of the night. He's tired. It's harder for him to work. They have to spend money on security. They have to now allocate a portion of their time. You do that to enough people, you can create friction for your political opponents. So it causes economic damage. It causes chaos. In terms of warfare, swatting is a masterfully powerful tactic.
It's demoralization, effectively.
But it also sows chaos in the community, and it makes it easier for the...
Like, he hasn't given an example of anybody who got... Like, I don't disbelieve him that there have been 20 swatting incidents. I don't even disbelieve him that 20 or 30 or however many it said right-wing, like, media figures have had this happen to them. I just, don't... It'd be nice if you just gave one example of somebody, like, maybe you're friendly with or whatever.
Let's be honest. This economy's been brutal. Mortgage, childcare, energy bills... And for a lot of homeowners, files can reduce your total payments. They've already helped hundreds of thousands of Americans. Just check their Google reviews. So take 10 minutes, call 866-8.
Don't use this company. They sponsor Triggernometry.
Or go to americanfinancing.net/trigonometry. Start feeling that relief today. That's 866-886-5350. Well, I wanted to take your argument through. I think you're making some really interesting points, and people can agree or disagree or whatever, but I just want to explore your argument. And the one thing that, as you're talking, it's actually, Franz and I were walking around yesterday, and the one thing that we notice, and we come to the US regularly, but we don't live here. And that it can be an interesting perspective because you're coming a couple of times a year, you're seeing how things are evolving, you've got an outsider perspective.
But you're not really seeing how things are evolving, or because you're going, these people, they're like going to like New York City and Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. So they're not really seeing much of the country.
One thing I said,
They're like seeing the area around their hotel and their
there
friends'
is a
podcast
hell of a
studios.
lot of latent anger in America. Like you just observe a normal interaction between people where someone cuts someone up in traffic, or a cyclist and a guy driving a car get into, and it's always like, "F you, buddy," like
That's very American, yes.
that. But I assumed that is just like, this is how American culture is versus the Brits. We're more polite. We'll call you a head behind your back, but
and then we'll get the knife out.
and then we'll get the knife out, right? And we'll report you to the police for your tweets. Like that's our approach. And I just assumed that you guys, frontier culture, blah 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 blah. Or do you feel that latent anger is getting more intense?
It's way more intense. I intentionally drove my Cybertruck here. Maybe I shouldn't say intentionally, but like it's my Cybertruck. I'm not gonna not take. I have 3 Teslas, and so I said, I'm gonna take the truck. I have my crew with me. They're my friends.
He did it so that he could get video of somebody fucking flipping him off or something, dude. He's doing it. He did it for that reason. Going into DC with that, yeah, he did that to see if maybe somebody would like throw a rock at his truck and shit.
For security reasons. And we didn't hire armed guards this time, but I was considering bringing one of our guys who's allowed to legally carry in DC. On the way here, it looked like a lady was trying to run us off the road. I say that lightly because sometimes people are bad drivers. But there was a woman who got within inches of the car and held the position while staring at us the whole time. And we're just looking like, what do we do? Do we this is crazy. My buddy was freaking out.
He's like, I'm not used to women looking at me.
Dude, she's staring us down, and she got on the line next to the truck within inches. And I was like, maybe we should get over. And then she held that. Maybe sometimes people are bad drivers. Maybe,
All right. Well, let's just agree that we agree that there's a lot of latent anger.
Well, I'll add one thing.
Yeah.
But it has to be about Tim. It has to be about Tim and his Cybertruck. It can't just be that people in this country are stressed and angry, and maybe we're at the breaking point or whatever. It has to be about Tim and his Cybertruck. Don't get it twisted, Constantine.
We're parking. People are staring at us, and one guy spit at us. Shaking her head at us. Bro, some guy spit at us. Like, he looked at us and he spit at the car, and a woman pointed at us. He looked and they spit at us.
You are a very well-known person in America who a lot of people don't like.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who don't like you, and fucking a lot of people don't like that ugly ass truck. So, and then you went to like a big city. You went to fucking Washington, D.C., where like everybody's into politics, and people were mean to you. Oh my fucking God.
See me in the car.
Okay, well, and we are in a very particular moment with the whole Tesla thing, right? But I guess what I was curious about is, like, we had Charlemagne on the show earlier, we talked to Andrew Schultz as well, and they both made an interesting point, I thought, and this comes back to the fact that you used to cover,
which Charlotte? Did he have he didn't know it was Charlemagne the God. Did Charlemagne the God go on this guy's show? I don't think so.
Wall Street movie. Yeah. You're right. Started in a big way. And what they were saying is, I think most people underestimate the impact of income and wealth inequality in this country on the way people feel, in that it is getting really expensive. Life is getting a lot harder. Mm-hmm. The American dream is becoming much more of a dream than a reality.
It's dead. As Donald Trump got that right, that the American dream is dead.
Many people. I think I remember I was talking to Chris Williamson about this, and he made the point that the average American has like less than $800 in savings. They're constantly on the verge of bankruptcy. One health issue, they're going to be screwed. That anger that you're talking about, do you think it comes from that reality, or do you think there's something else?
No, it's because people don't like Tim Pool's Cybertruck.
It technically does. It's the perception of the wealth inequality. It's the perception of the American dream. The American dream still exists. It always has. The American dream was never that you were going to get.
But the American dream has always been socially constructed, and it's been a part of our like shared reality, a thing that we kind of all agree that is real. It's not like a physical thing that you can put your hands on and prove exists.
And then make hundreds of thousands of dollars and go on vacation. The American dream was that you could move here from the Philippines live in a 1-bedroom apartment with your 3 kids and wife sharing literally just the one room. You would work 16-hour shifts every single day, but
that was never the American dream. The American dream was very, very white suburban coded. The American dream was you can have a single income, work 8 or 9 hours a day, and buy a house and take care of your wife and your kids. That was the old American dream. The updated version of it was probably you need 2 incomes, but you'll probably be okay. And now you both need 2 jobs, and I don't know. Good luck having money for kids.
Would advance upward in class, whereas the home country you came from, you couldn't do that. It was a country where a kid from the inner city with not even 2 nickels to rub together could look the president in the eye and say, "Go f yourself, Mr. President," and nothing could be done about it. The American dream very, very much is still there, but the perception of it is going away.
This guy thinks like kids from the first, his description of a kid from the inner city, whatever, it's dumb, but like that they would have access to the president is absurd.
Because of our cultural failings. This all ties back to the emergence of social media, the exploitation of algorithms, and the perception that was created among the younger generation that America sucks, when in fact it doesn't. These people have never been to other countries. They don't understand what it's like. And so they live in this country where they perceive everything through the lens of a largely leftist hatred algorithm, which was intended to make money. And now they think everything's bad. They think it's getting worse. They blame the wealthy for their problems. They don't realize these class mobility and opportunity doesn't exist in other countries. That being said, it's not made better by our economic crises with the food shortages, egg prices, gas prices. That certainly plays a large role.
Food shortages are possibly about to get a lot worse. We get a lot of, especially on the West Coast, we get a lot of fruit and vegetables from Mexico.
Well,
this is what I was going to say. I'm not an American, so I'm just exploring the argument. You push back on this, but I would imagine a part of the American dream is not just that your kids would do better, which, by the way, they're probably not going to, both in this country and in our country, right? That sense of the next generation, like only 30% of Americans, according to the latest poll, think that their children would do better.
But a Filipino family's children?
So here's what I'm saying, right? But I think there is also
why the Philippines? Wait, isn't Duterte? What a weird thing to pick. Oh no, the Duterte is no longer there. I think it's like Marcos.
Which is, it's not just about your kids doing better. There are certain markers that people would think are signifiers of them doing better, which is they own their own house, right? Which means that they can pass wealth down to the next generation. And they have the opportunity basically to have kids, right? That is unavailable to a lot of people for purely financial reasons.
I disagree.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, why do you disagree? It's not a thing you can agree or disagree with. This is the truth.
The people who made this country, the founders of this country, the conquerors of this continent, got on boats.
Ooh, not great. The conquerors of the continent.
People on those boats died. When they landed, they arrived on barren shores. They knew they were sailing to barren shores.
Sir, there was multiple civilizations here. There were people that were here, sir.
And after that, a majority of them died. And those who survived the winter, either through sheer grit, luck, or the assistance of Native Americans in some instances, were able to then have children, and a lot of
the assistance of Native. You didn't just do that. You just said, through luck and the assistance of Native Americans, they were able to have kids. Oh my fucking God.
Grit was passed down. This is why I see the difference between the European perspective on hate speech and things like this versus the United States. Gun rights, for instance. That harsh journey, it killed the weak. Or I don't even think the people were weak who did it. They were all very strong people to make that decision.
Wait, why were they all strong?
You have people who are like, if I don't have a TV, 2 weeks vacation, then I'm not doing well.
Well, a lot of people have a fucking big TV and they get 2 weeks paid vacation at work and they still don't think they're doing this. Is what the fuck?
Owning a house is important. But back then, you'd walk into the woods and you didn't have a house. And to have one, you had to put sticks and leaves together. That was a dream come true for these people. Now, I understand we want...
Right, but you can't... There's nowhere to homestead anymore, Tim.
And people expect a certain degree of comfort. But I think an important perspective people should have is where we came from and what was considered to be prosperity and luxury involved extreme high rates of death, sacrifice, and difficulty that no one experiences today. Even poor people have access to clean drinking water. Unheard of. If you're a homeless man in this country, you likely are obese. This is a fact in the United States. Our homeless are likely to be obese.
What the fuck?
I mean, there is an incongruence in the function of what our society should be doing.
So obesity, like if you're skinny, generally it isn't because you lack food. And if you're fat, it's generally not because you have too much access to food. There are like other factors in this, like obesity as a medical term or whatever, just being fat tracks with poverty. So if it tracks with poverty, you would assume that the most impoverished, those without even a fucking roof over their head and a fucking pot to piss in, are going to be more likely to be fat because it tracks poverty. Going to the gym is a luxury. Having time to go exercise is a luxury. I get to ride my bike around everywhere. I'm not super skinny, but I'm doing okay for 48. That's a luxury. These are luxuries. Like, what is he talking about?
People do want to own homes, have families. But if you take a look at some of the poorest areas, it's the poorer people who are having more kids. So I would say largely among those who purport to be angry at our government and our structure, they don't even want to have kids. They're advocating in media not to have kids.
Okay. Okay, now you don't want to have kids, so you can't be angry about the material conditions that you and your fellow citizens live in because you don't want to have any kids. Like, what the fuck?
They're angry at structure.
Where's this guy's kids?
Based off of a perception built by an algorithmic media machine that was simply trying to make them angry to make money. Now they live in a world of fear.
But you are an integral part of that fucking, I don't like the word algorithm used here because it's misunderstood, I suppose. But Tim Pool is an integral part of the fucking internet hate machine that he's talking about. He is the internet hate machine.
Fear and hatred, pure hatred. And you ask them, why do you hate Teslas so much? 2 years ago, you told us we had to own one.
Wait, no, 2 years ago, a lot of us knew that Elon Musk was a giant piece of shit. And nobody told you had to go buy one. Again, this is like a conflation of essentially we believe in climate change and we think that going forward, hopefully we'll be able to produce electricity in a more efficient way with using less and less fossil fuels. So the obvious answer or the obvious thing to do with a car is to buy an electric one, assuming that we get more of our electricity from wind, solar, and like geothermal, or even nuclear. It doesn't mean you have to go buy a specific company's car.
Fear bombing them and cheering for it on TV. There's no logic behind what they're angry about. This is why I refer to the left largely as a cult. You have the people who are scared to defy it because they live in these areas and they know someone will shoot at them or smash their cars or their windows.
Wait, what?
Put stickers on their cars. They put signs on their windows. Please don't hurt me. And then you have people who just, without thought, will hate what they're told to hate and not be able to explain to you why.
Oh, this is great. I love that, that he does this, and conspiracy theorists, like chemtrails people, do this, right? They deny that people who don't believe what they believe have any agency, right? They believe what they believe because they've fucking figured it out with their fucking super brain or whatever. But you believe what you believe because the fucking television told you to. And that's the way it is. That's a dumb way to look at the world. Listen, I don't agree with Tim Pool. I think Tim Pool's a fucking idiot. And I think he's a pretty horrible propagandist who is part of the internet hate machine that he's deriding here. But I don't deny him his agency, right? I don't think that he's just doing this because someone else told him to. I mean, there's obviously, misaligned and poorly aligned incentives in new media, the same as old media. But I don't deny this motherfucker his agency. This guy made all the decisions that got him to where he's at. The only one of these people who I think maybe doesn't know what he's doing is Dave Rubin, but that's because Dave Rubin is dumb as fuck.
But you say the left is a cult.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the whole of the left. Let's be fair, Tim. That is a very small percentage of people. I can do the same thing with the right. And I can say, look, the right, they're completely insane. Look at these nutbags on Twitter.
You'd be wrong.
Really?
Yeah. RFK Jr., former liberal. Tulsi Gabbard, former liberal. Donald Trump, former liberal. Elon Musk, former liberal. Colin Wright, former liberal. Tim Pool, former liberal. How is it that the popular
people can like change? People changed him. You're not like giving us a list of the best and the brightest of the left.
Donald Trump was a Democrat up until his first term. That
Donald Trump was a Democrat because he was fucking trying to influence the New York City political machine. And to do that, you had to influence Democratic politicians. And if you were trying to influence Democratic politicians, it was probably pretty good to be a registered Democrat.
Gabbard, DNI, former Democrat that I supported in 2020. I never voted Republican. I didn't like Republicans. And now the Republican MAGA movement, not the neocons, is an eclectic bunch of diverse views which debate each other. How is it that Charlie Kirk, Christian conservative with one of the largest conservative platforms, invites moderate pro-choice Tim Pool onto his stage?
I didn't even know he was pro-choice. You don't have to, this is like, you don't, if Tim Pool, if even Charlie Kirk, who I don't like, if you wanted somebody who agreed with everything, with him about everything at all times to be on that stage at all times, he'd have to do the whole event himself.
For his biggest event of the year, to discuss those views to the public. On the left.
I'm sorry, we could go back and watch Tim Pool's appearance at Turning Point USA. I don't think he went up there and was advocating for a woman's right to choose an abortion. I don't think that's what he was up there doing at all. He was up there fucking riling people up about how evil the left is, for sure.
Happen if you went and opposed their views at a public forum. You'd be threatened with violence. And I'm not saying literally everyone all the time, but booking liberals to come.
But there is no liberal Turning Point. Where's the fucking liberal group that is doing the things that Turning Point USA is doing, having these big rallies? Where is the left on this stuff? I mean, Taylor Swift concert? Like, what is he talking about?
My show or any other show, people in this
We have the same problem.
Yeah.
They refuse to do it.
They don't want to talk.
Back in, I think it was 2018.
But George, we should say why.
No. It's because these people want like the senator who's like the head of the Democratic senators to come on, right? They want like the top of the layer cake coming on their shows. And so like, to the credit of Tim Pool, to some extent, he's had Sam Cedar on twice. You think the Triggernometry, Sam Cedar said, I'll talk to anybody. You think they're going to have Sam on? My God, the things Sam Cedar would do to the Triggernometry boys. Oh my God. Like there are left-wing polemicists who have big platforms. I'm not talking about myself here. I have no business on the Tim Pool show or Triggernometry. We're working on it, but I have no business there. But you got like Hassan Piker, you got like David Pakman, who has a big platform. Trying to think like those clickbaity guys. I forget the name of it. The name of them now. Their platform is getting bigger, and one of them is actually really good. They're not having any of these people on. The only person doing the thing that they're talking about and having a bunch of left wing people on, crazy enough, is fucking Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan is doing that. Piers Morgan is a conservative. He has conservatives on, and he has liberals and even like lefties on. Piers Morgan is old ass fucking legacy media. Piers Morgan is doing the thing that these people are pretending to do, and it's a fucking shit show. I think none of these people want to deal with that. And Piers Morgan doesn't care. He's rich as fuck, and he's got like old money riches.
They're scared of their own side.
Yeah.
It's a cult. So I can sit in front of a libertarian like Dave Smith, who's going to rant about how Israel is bad, and Charlie Kirk at the same time, and we leave with.
Did you have them on together?
And smiles on our faces. And Dave will say, Charlie, I really do appreciate it. I think you do good work. I know we disagree. The left doesn't do that. They firebomb your buildings. Or they just don't show up. Or they try to get you fired. They swap.
Name the names. Name the names of the fucking lefties. But all of you, name the names. Give us the names. If you were in communication with somebody and they then backed out of coming on your show, name their names. Because even in the UK, where the libel laws are pretty nasty, if it's true that you have an email correspondence or some kind of correspondence with somebody, and they decide they backed out of coming on your show or whatever, name their names. Just say their names.
The reason I say it's a cult is because you could not define what they believe. It's impossible. Hassan Piker famously made a video responding to me where he said, I said the military-industrial complex is a bad thing. The U.S. imperialism imposing its will through financing. He pauses the video and he says, He's completely right on this one. I agree. And then I said, this is why I don't think Ukraine is a special case. Why the U.S. has given Ukraine more money than Israel in 2 years than Israel got in 50. And then Hassan breaks and goes, this guy actually thinks we shouldn't support Ukraine? Now be consistent, buddy. Are you concerned about U.S. imperial expansion into foreign countries? Or are you simply pretending that's the case? You could not map the logic of their principles or plan.
Except that fucking Tim Pool seems to be very much in favor of the U.S. giving arms to Israel.
I think
I think it's case by case. If you got the fucking, if you're the country that has all the fucking guns and shit, it's going to be a case by case basis who you're going to help. It ain't no different than being out on the street. It's no different. There's no difference. It's who are you going to help? Do you like them? Or are they your ally? Like, what the fuck?
The left swings around randomly in random directions. Nobody knows exactly where they're turning left or right or up or down. They're just trying to make sure they stay safely in a position where someone else won't bludgeon them in the head with a bike lock. So Tesla's a great example. 2 years ago, Stephen Colbert bragged on his show he owns a Tesla. Today, he's making jokes about how it's funny that people are firebombing them. Well, that don't make sense. You've got.
Did Stephen Colbert brag about owning a Tesla 2 years ago? I think it's a little late in the game.
And you could play this game both ways. You could say all these people used to say Trump is a loose cannon and is a crazy and whatever. Now they're all in his White House.
Some of them,
Yeah.
but I always point to tendencies. There is a cult on the right that Trump can do no wrong, and I've criticized these people very heavily. They attacked Joe Rogan, and I'm like, are you guys nuts? Joe Rogan's a moderate who speaks to many different people of all persuasions.
Joe Rogan's guest list leans hard towards conservatives and conspiracy theorists.
Let him cook, bro. And they attacked me for it. I said, I don't give a shit. I was like, you guys are nuts. While vocal, they don't dictate. They don't control.
It's true. It's true.
On the left, you better adhere or else.
Adhere to what?
I would say let's just try and be as fair, I suppose, and say it's 2-to-1 cult on the left and 2-to-1 not cult on the right. Maybe 30% of the right is culty, 60% of the left is culty. So
What does he mean by the left?
the culty elements of the right will be forced to entertain arguments they do not appreciate or like. The left does not. And more importantly, even those who are rather culty on the right will still try to give you a reason as to why they support Trump. The reason why they've changed their views. Oh, Donald Trump is doing something authoritarian. Well, because of this, that, or otherwise, I've changed my mind. On the left, it doesn't make sense. Famously, the Coalition for Communities of Color said Slavic people are people of color. So blonde-haired, blue-eyed Luke Rudkowski is a person of color.
I would like to see, again, the statement they put out. That might have been in the wake of like some sort of maybe community thing where there was bigotry or violence even against the Slavic community. And then because hopefully, and I think that thankfully enough, it generally happens, other oppressed groups will show some support. This is sort of like saying, well, why were the Jews marching with the black people during the civil rights movement? Well, I mean, they were a historically oppressed group too, so they're like, oh, I totally get it. Let's march. Like this is like a version of that, and it's kind of stupid.
That's the world they live in. Slavs are oppressed peoples. You get one of my favorite.
They can be if people decide that there's too many. Where are all these fucking Slavs coming from? Why are they opening? Why did my friend's bar is gone now and it's owned by the fucking Slavs? Yeah, people find all kind of dumb reasons to hate other groups of people and shit in big communities, big and small. You betcha. And the hope that a community like if a bunch of Slavs ended up somewhere, the hope would be that if the majority group tried to come after them, that regular people who are of the majority group and maybe people who are of other majority groups would come stand by your side to try to stop what's happening. I don't understand the problem here. I don't understand why this is weird.
Years ago, the Wimixon scandal. I know you're probably saying, what the fuck is that word? Woman, where the E is an X.
Yeah.
And they said, this way we're being inclusive of all women, including trans women and women of color.
Yeah, but fucking 7 people on Twitter were doing this, right? This was 7 or 8 people on Twitter were doing this. You were just annoyed by it.
Well, within a week of using this, They were attacked by trans activists because they said trans women are women. And by creating a new word, you are now arguing that trans women need a special classification. So you're...
I don't know. Wait, he says the people on the... Wait, when it happens on the right and people are like, hey, you're wrong and this and that, and that's a debate, right? People are having a debate. They're discussing ideas. It's a big tent group, not very culty. If it happens among people on the left, well, now this is an attack. They're being attacked. Why is one being framed as like a debate and people with different ideas having conversations, and the other is being framed as an attack? This is an attack now. This is all in like how you want to see it, right? It's like, what color glasses are you looking at each scene through? How are the scenes edited?
Listen, man, you don't need to persuade us that the left went full retard. Like, you genuinely.
Wait, why? What the fuck? Constantine, my God.
There are people who always thought, you say liberal, like that's how we always thought of ourselves. And then we just looked at that and went, oh my God, what the fuck is going on? And then we got ostracized for saying that.
Exactly.
Right?
So what happened to Constantine and non-Olivers, they tried to be comedians and that didn't work. They claim that they were like part of the London comedy scene, but we've watched videos of Constantine talking about his comedy career and having to drive like 4 hours each way in a car to get like $200 for a comedy gig. Well, if you were part of the London comedy scene, you could have just got on the underground and gone to your gig, but you had to drive like outside of London. You had to drive hours to get to like some place that would let you do comedy. So like this is, they were not part of the London comedy scene. So they started doing this show and like it picked up because they called it Triggernometry because get it? It triggers the libs. And it just picked up because fucking bunch of dumb Gamergate fucking washouts, fucking Reddit atheists and shit started watching their show.
I'll ask you those. Do you think we were here during the election, before the election and after the election? We were there during that entire time. And a lot of people anticipated a lot of street violence, a lot of protest, and there was none of that. Like we were in LA when the election happened. And the people we'd been seeing all over the rest of the country were like, well, you guys are going in to see some riots over there. And it was chill as hell because I just think everybody accepted the outcome. Do you not think look, do you think it's possible that these flare-ups, like the BLM riots of 2020, like the riots we had in the UK, these are part of living in societies that are struggling economically, they're racially mixed, there's et cetera, et cetera.
I would not even, the racial mix probably doesn't matter, but the struggling economically, even Constantine Kissin. I know he's like framing it like he's devil's advocating this, but this is probably like what he thinks. Because I don't think he's a dummy. I think he's a grifter, but I don't think he's a dummy.
And eventually these things balance themselves out.
It's possible. Also, historically, these things turn to civil wars. So pick your history. Which one do you think is going to happen?
Well, the problem here is you're able to like a civil war, right? You're like, aha, that country had a civil war in that country, but you're not like thinking about the fact that like this all didn't happen the same year, right? That like, yeah, like civilizations die or civilizations, countries, nations die and new nations are formed out of the rubble. But this is not just happening to everybody every 3 years and shit. Unless the CIA gets involved in your shit. And then maybe it does happen to you every 3 years. But don't worry, if you try to immigrate to the United States, we'll call you a terrorist.
I don't know that civil war is greater than 50%. I'm just saying that when you get all these experts coming out and saying, yikes, we're in civil war conditions. I mean, Jamie Raskin literally said a year ago that should Trump win, we will be faced with civil war conditions. And it'll be our job in Congress to tell Donald Trump, you are not eligible to be president, and deny him that. They didn't do it. I think they realized they lack the let's just say wartime resources to actually engage in this. But I think
they don't have an army.
The real reason they did.
Good thing political parties don't have armies.
They've planted 235 progressive judges in the federal courts in D.C. Largely with the intention of blocking Trump no matter what he does. I'm being a little hyperbolic. He said to stop Donald Trump's agenda. Now we can see the lawful exercise of power that Donald Trump is trying to use is being blocked no matter what. Ad absurdum. The president engages in negotiations with a foreign country for the extradition of non-citizen enemies of this nation, street gangs from another country that have been labeled domestic terror.
But labeled a domestic terrorist. Like, what the fuck does that mean? You can just label anybody a domestic terrorist. Does this motherfucker read the Patriot Act? I bet we can find stuff where he's talking about how the Patriot Act is bad. This is all probably under the Patriot Act, under provisions from the Patriot Act.
And additionally, in 1948, there was a court case, a federal court case, which ruled there is no judicial review for this process. You want to change it? Absolutely. Let's change it. I'm totally fine with that. In the meantime, Donald Trump is within his rights as the chief executive to enter negotiations with the president of a foreign country as for the deportation and transport of criminals. A lower court judge instructed him to return these people to this country, turn the plane around. Now, on the surface, the media is saying Trump can't deport. No. The judge ruled that Donald Trump must sever his negotiations with a world leader from a foreign country. Imagine it was something more serious.
Tim, can I just stop you on that? Because I was reading in a publication in the UK that the reason was because a lot of the guys hadn't been convicted of anything.
Well, they don't need to be.
Right, but wait, what? We have immigration courts. Their job is to like adjudicate. Like the Constitution says people, not citizens. Like, when you are here, you are subject to all the protections and all the responsibilities of United States law. That's how being in the fucking country is. Whether you're here legally or not, if you are responsible to follow the law, and you are, then the law applies to you in also the positive ways that the law can apply to you. Like, what is he talking about?
Enemies Act, precedent has already been set. There is no judicial review for non-citizen combatants under the Alien Enemies Act.
Okay.
But calling them combatants when they're just, what combat are these people? What do you mean combatants? They got up every day and they got to work. Most of these people. Like, what do you mean combatants? Why are we calling them combatants?
So
they're not even coming here and starting shit.
Founding fathers were very smart. They got together and they said, should we do a representative democracy? Oh no, it's going to devolve into squabbles. You can't react properly to emergencies. Should we do a council of elders? Smart, learned men that we can...
No.
Same problem. And then what if you get many tyrants and they can't agree? Should we do a king? No, we have problems with kings. And they said, let's do all three. And they can argue amongst themselves. We'll bestow specific powers among each. That way we give the strength to each. The Council of Elders review the process of both and determine whether or not they can or can't. That's a Supreme Court. Representative democracy will determine the laws of this country. The executive will handle war and the upholding of our laws. Each has the ability to check the other in one way or another. As it pertains to foreign military actions, the president has plenary powers, but he can't declare wars. He can't set the budget for wars. He can simply direct how we engage with what Congress determines.
It turns out the administration can initiate a war. There's just no declaration of war from Congress. But boy, howdy, has the administration of this country initiated war without the Congress declaring war on anybody.
If Congress passes a law, say, creating the Department of Education, and they say the function of the Department of Education shall be A, B, and C, the president cannot dismantle it through executive order. The president can, however, instruct the people who are working there to stop using computers and to juggle bowling pins instead, which would effectively shut down Congress's attempt. That's one way they can check that power.
That's insanity that the system is set up that way, actually.
Issues of foreign policy first, the problem we have in this country is we haven't declared war since World War II. Congress has effectively given the executive branch carte blanche, which has been a big mistake. But now when we're dealing with Tren de Arago, we all know it's a problem. Mm-hmm. I believe there should be transparency.
No, wait, I was like, what? Because they call it TA or whatever they were calling it, or TUA or whatever. I was like, what the shit is that? They're like, the article was like, it was like this scary ass article about it. Or in cities like Oakland and fucking, I forget, they just named all the big cities. I'm like, what are you talking about?
But these people got the due process they deserve through our system. Trump needs to prove to the public these are the people we
remember the Bloods and the Crips, and everybody was all afraid of the fucking Bloods and the Crips. There's a great episode of You're Wrong About that talks about the Bloods and the Crips, and it was just like, it was fucking nobody, right? It was fucking nobody. They were like calling any group of people that hung out together a gang and shit. There was fucking nobody, and that's what they're doing with MS-13 and this Tren de Arago thing. They're just doing another fucking moral gang panic.
Trump to round up random people and lie about it. Corrupt people can do that. Mm-hmm. However, what's happened with these court rulings, it is not a question of, can Trump do this? It is a question of, should we continue to do this? So the actions Donald Trump took are permitted, and a judge tried to sever a binding international negotiation. If Donald Trump went to Netanyahu right now and said, stop bombing Gaza, or we will pull all military assets from Israel and cut your funding tonight. And then Netanyahu said, no, we're going to double the bombings. Trump then says, load up our planes, send our boys home. Imagine what would happen if a lower court city judge banged a gavel and said, cancel Trump's negotiation.
Did he say a city judge or a sitting judge? I swear to you, he just said a city judge. Like the judge of fucking, like some judge in a fucking, like a superior court or whatever in fucking Poughkeepsie is going to like overrule the president. Get out of here.
Turn all the military assets to Israel so they can continue the bombing campaign, completely undermining our ability to negotiate. A better example would be Trump and Putin. Trump goes to Putin and says, we're going to end the war in Ukraine tonight. You are going to withdraw from the Donbass. Putin says, only if you remove all military assets and support to the Ukrainians. Trump says, done. Then a lower court judge bangs the gavel and says, Trump has no authority to do this. The war remains. If that were the case and that were possible, no world leader would ever negotiate with our president ever again. It would require the executive branch to get
wouldn't you want to negotiate with wouldn't you want to negotiate with a country where there's like checks and balances on what the fucking leader can do, even if that means that occasionally you'll have to like renegotiate something because it turns out that the terms of the negotiation, for whatever reason, actually were some of the things were maybe outside of the president's purview, outside of the president's sphere of influence. That'd be fine. You just gotta people gotta rewrite contracts all the time. There's no problem.
Just putting the executive branch underneath the judicial. But a better,
like, how does this guy think fucking negotiations happen? Like, does he think that it's like negotiations are happening all the time? That's what like the State Department's doing. And I guarantee you that over the course of like my lifetime, there have been State Department agents who made like sort of handshake informal agreements with diplomats from other countries and then had to like go back and be like, okay, well, we can't really do it this way. So what's the difference if it's the president?
That Donald Trump, as the commander-in-chief, determines who is fit to serve and who serves. He signed an executive order saying, I'll give you the simple version. If you are suffering from gender dysphoria and exhibiting symptoms, you are barred from service in the military. If you are suffering from gender dysphoria and showing no symptoms, you are fine. We will give you exceptions. Judge Reyes in D.C. ruled
that violates the fucking 14th Amendment. Watch, that's what the judge. This is fucking the 14th Amendment. Like, this is like, come on, this violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Probably all kinds of other laws. If you were calling this a medical condition, you're probably violating all kind of other laws now too, actually. All kinds of like medical privacy laws, anti-discrimination laws, not just federal, but state. I know the military doesn't necessarily have to abide by like individual state or locality regulations for stuff like this, but like you're violating all kinds of different laws.
Trump cannot discriminate against anyone for any reason. I'm not kidding. Literally, the injunction was preliminary, so it has changed in the past few days. The initial injunction stated, quote, all means all. And anybody, that's actual quote, but we're going to say anybody who wants to enlist should be allowed to. This means that bipolar manic paraplegics should be brought into basic training. That makes no sense.
Wait, what?
Or someone suffering from belief.
Well, no. The argument here that Tim doesn't want to make, because the other, I can tell you what the argument of maybe the courts are, or what people are more liberal minded think, is like, if this person's applying for this job and they meet the requirements for this job, you being worried about what kind of, whether they got a penis or a vagina like down there is like not really relevant. Like, that's your problem. And if this person applies for the job and is qualified for the job and wants the job, and you would hire there's no reason they shouldn't be hired. Obviously, somebody who suffers with paraplegia or quadriplegia or have fucking lost a hand in an accident or whatever, they're probably not going to be infantry. But there might be a place in the military for them that isn't fighting. Like, the military is like an elephantine bureaucracy that probably needs to be torn apart. But there's a lot of pencil pushers and shit in there. Like there are people sitting at computers all day. Like there's all kinds of jobs in the military.
And decides after a chow hall, I'm going to vomit all over the floor, must be affirmed in their mental disorder. That's psychotic.
Well, wait a minute. What if they threw up because they're sick? What if this person has like something wrong with their digestive system that they're unaware of and they throw up kind of regularly?
Lower court ruled the president must have them serve his army? That makes no sense. The president could simply say, sure, they're in the military, and now I'm going to go order them to sit in a warehouse in the back corner where they can't do anything. The president can do that.
Fucking hook me. How much? Can I stream? Can I stream from there? The warehouse got fiber?
One of the scenarios that I believe is possible, of course, is that we're on the back end of whatever this cold civil war is. The administrative forces that have been seeking to obstruct the MAGA movement, the populist movement, are weak and being crushed. That's why.
Oh, that's the fucking, this is fucking QAnon shit. You hear that? This is why I fucking, like QAA, like had to quit focusing on QAnon because it's the same thing here with us sort of winding down this intellectual dark web show, is that all this shit is just the news now. This is all just normal fucking politics. That shit was pilled. That shit Tim just said about the forces, the forces in the government that are trying to stop our movement are weak now. I mean, you could just turn that into some cryptic shit and people would believe that's a Q drop.
Riots after Trump won in 2024. There's just no energy for it. And people are actually fed up with what the Democratic administration had been bringing us. Now what we are seeing is...
Actually, most Democrats liked I think the policies under the Biden administration were generally pretty good. I think most people, not just Democrats, I think just you don't tell them anything about the policy. I think most people liked most of them. He didn't do anything like revolutionary. But I think the problem with that election was that the Democrats, other than being able to govern, don't have their shit together, right? The Democratic Party's pretty good at governing. I'd say they have problems like any other party, sure, and they're fucking full of warmongers and fucking people who like hate Palestinians and shit. Pretty good at governing, but the Democratic Party is really bad at running for office. They're just like so like you're like the best engineer, but man, you just fart and fucking burp and shit during the interview, show the worst sides of you, piss off the hiring manager and the HR manager. Fucking the employees get a bad vibe off you when you walk in the door when you're trying to do the interview. That's the Democratic Party. Once that person gets the job, once somebody hires them, they're going to be great at their job. And actually their coworkers are going to like them, even though they're a little farty.
The First Order in Star Wars, the Empire's gone, but there still are angry remnants that don't want to give up the fight. I'm hoping throughout the next couple of years, the judges either get impeached.
I'm sorry, he didn't just do that. I'm not even a Star Wars guy. He didn't just do that. He just did that.
Or stop and give up. The activists decide the violence isn't worth it. Trump starts arresting these people. The swatters get hunted down by Dan Bongino. The Tesla attacks result in 20-year prison sentences. And then in 2 years, everything looks kind of like 1997.
Whoa, dude, these people love the 90s. And they don't love the 90s for like the good reason that you would love the 90s. If you love the 90s for a good reason, it's like because there was raves. That's why I loved the mid to late 90s. Hot damn, there were a lot of raves. These people think that there was like no racial strife and no homophobia and that everybody was rich. They have this like fucked up, it's like how people pine, like the fucking boomers would pine away for like the 50s. I think the 90s are like a new version of that for a certain kind of from like let's say from like a shit lib all the way right to Tim Pool. There's like a certain nostalgia for this time. They're like, the music was better. And then they go find out about what the music they're listening to punk rock, right? They go listen to punk rock again. And they're like, hey, these lyrics, wait a minute. What is this Killing in the Name of song about?
That may be the case. And I hope it is. Civil strife sometimes doesn't turn into civil war. I'm hoping that's where we are.
Back when we launched our first bit of Triggernometry merch, we thought we could manage the shipping ourselves. Let's just say say the local thing.
Well, that's good that they're not on fourth wall.
So if you're serious about growing your business without for a free when you have and that's shipstation.com code trigger. Right. Back to the show. Buy our merch. And I think one of the things that you touched on, and the thing that I always find shocking here from a purely outside point of view, is the number of mentally ill people that you have in this country. And that, when you have mentally ill...
Oh, no. Does this guy think that there's no mental illness in the UK? I think he's from like a kind of a posh, like sort of polite society version of the, like part of the UK where if people had mental illnesses or any other kind of disability, that the family would hide them away because it was like it was improper, right? Can't bring them to the tea; they'll act weird. I think he's from that kind of fucking British background.
People plus easy access to guns, that can create a situation.
Oh, but no, he's doing the Scientology thing where the mental illness is why there's all these mass shootings. Well, no, because you can like like reverse fanfic anybody that does a mass shooting and be like, well, they must be crazy. But that's very different than them having been diagnosed with a mental illness, or maybe even having lived with a mental illness undiagnosed. Like, yeah, it's fucking crazy to go shoot a bunch of people, like obviously, but that's not the same thing.
A presidential assassination attempt can happen, or even, God forbid, an actual assassination. And that's a sort of thing that can spark a civil war or any type of war.
What's the political persuasion of the mentally ill? It's a fact. It's documented.
I don't know.
Liberals.
Not just liberals.
Look it up.
Look up what? Even fucking non-Oliver and Constantine are going to be like, come on, dude, come on.
Not just liberals.
Look it up.
Hold on. What you're saying is if you look at the mentally ill population, they skew left.
They skew like 60, 70% left. The argument from the left is that people on the right don't seek therapy, so they don't get prescribed. Perhaps. But overwhelmingly...
Prescribed? You mean diagnosed? Or it could be that if you are living in this country and you have a mental illness and you're being discriminated against, you look at the two political parties, or you look at like the two kinds of, I don't even like bifurcating it like this, but I guess like you look at the two general sort of political bents of the United States, and you're like, ooh, those people over there, they're standing kind of close to the eugenics people. I know they're not themselves eugenicists, but they're standing kind of close to them at the barbecue. You look over at the other people who are like, oh, these people are standing a little further away from the eugenics people. I think we'll go hang out with them.
Followed by liberal males. Liberals have extremely high rates of mental illness relative to conservatives. Let's be real. Someone who's going
to this is all about diagnosis. This is all about diagnosis. And if you're being discriminated against, you're more likely to be liberal.
Bomb at a Tesla and write "Long live Ukraine." They don't know what they're fighting for. They're mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I guess what all we're saying is it's not like mentally ill right-wing people with guns have never done anything.
How many right-wing terror attacks have there been in the United States in the past 10 years?
Oh, that's a lot. The FBI has fucking shit on this. That's a lot. So the Pulse nightclub shooting comes to mind first. That was a little bit more complicated. Any school shooting, I'm going to call this political terrorism, right? I'm going to call this terrorist. Any school shooting is terrorism. Fucking people, they went and did somebody go shoot up a Sikh temple? Like, that's terrorism, right? Like, I'm just naming fucking things. Like, well, he said 50 years. Did we go back to Columbine? I don't know. I think those kids were apolitical. They were apolitical. Oh my God, how far back do we? I think he wants to go back 50 years so you can include some of the Weather Underground bombing of not abortion clinics. I'm sorry, of government buildings back in the day. I think he wants to go back. That'd be 50 years would be like the 70s. Yeah, I think Homeboy wants to go back that far because of the Weather Underground.
Look, we have the same argument in the UK, which is like we're told to worry about the far right when a lot of it is Islamist. We're just the statement.
Wait, what Islam? No, we have fucking statistics on this. So 9/11 was obviously an act of terror put on by the people who believe and the Prophet Muhammad, and they were, I believe, propped up by the nation of Saudi Arabia, so far as I can tell. But that was like a highly funded like terror attack happening from like foreign nationals who came here to do that. We're talking like apples and oranges from like the person who grew up somewhere and then goes and fucking murders people at the school they went to, or at the school down the street that they didn't go to, or whatever. We're talking, this is apples and oranges. These are not the same thing.
We're generalizing.
Well, I'm not trying to speak in absolutes. I'm speaking in generalities.
Yeah.
If you and my point is this: why is it that right now what we see is people who are mentally ill have like a 2-to-1 rate of leaning towards liberal ideology? Well, because the ideology itself is fractured, and the people like me or like you have abandoned it, or maybe
Yeah, but y'all are crazy.
abandoned, but are no longer a part of it. So it's not so much a function of if you are liberal, you are mentally ill. It's a function of the current iteration of the liberal social cohort is not conducive to a rational person's political ideology.
Wait, why?
Leave that space, leaving behind all.
But if you're like rational, I don't even like the word, but if you're rational, part of being rational, unfortunately, the flip side of it is you can rationalize any dumb shit that you tell yourself, right? Or somebody that convinces you of something, and you can rationalize to yourself or someone else even why you believe it. Like being rational, well-spoken, skeptical, smart, whatever they want to say, it isn't like a magic bullet that means that you're not going to get duped and taken advantage of, and then possibly end up fucking spreading thought disease or whatever all over your society. That doesn't mean, that's not what smart is.
The irrational, creating a higher density of people who are unwell. So it's the reverse correlation. It's not that you read liberal ideology and your brain stops working. It's that,
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, like X1011 in chat just said, man, maybe people who with mental illness like tend towards the folks that offer them, like try to like increase funding occasionally for services that help themselves and people like them.
want violence and are not mentally ill have abandoned it because mentally ill people have been attacking them and destroying their lives. Now,
Wait, what are you talking about? Now, he went from, have there been any right-wing terrorist attacks? Notice how he didn't give you any numbers or anything, didn't actually answer the question or whatever. Now he's like, everybody's getting attacked by the mentally ill all the time and they're sick of it. Well, are you sure? I live in a place that he would be terrified to even fly into the Oakland airport, right? This guy is like one of those, I hate the city and I'm afraid of the city people. I see people who are clearly suffering with mental illness every time I go out. And I'm fine. I've never been attacked. Nothing's happened to me. I've lived in San Jose, San Francisco. Now I live in Oakland. I've lived in Berkeley. And there have always been people with mental problems. Some of them on the street, possibly because they have mental problems, or maybe they're more likely their mental problems come from living on the street. I don't generally feel unsafe around people who are even clearly in crisis. I don't generally feel unsafe. I don't know what he's talking about.
to that cohort.
Right, okay, but there's also as well, there's people, I walk out on the streets of New York or any city in America, and I see people who are utterly sick.
Yo, non-Oliver. Your country has a fucking healthcare system that takes care of those people. Your country has universal healthcare, non-Oliver. Non-Oliver, you don't see as many people in that kind of crisis in London because they are given treatment for free, at taxpayer expense, non-Oliver. Is the treatment perfect? No, there's probably a whole bunch of one flew over the cuckoo's nest shit going on in the UK. I don't doubt that. But that's why he doesn't see them in London.
Clearly sick, and it's got nothing to do with ideology.
Agreed.
Yeah, and
except that your country's ideology is that the healthcare should be taxpayer funded and everyone should have access.
That is a very, very real problem, because that is also showing the fact that you are not looking after these people. These people need to be looked after.
Agreed.
You know, and
bring the asylums back. Yeah.
So, and we're going to probably this is a good place to end this. We're going to watch more of this during red light, and we'll give the show away for free. In theory, having hospitals, inpatient hospitals for people who are having crises, mental health crises, or who are have terminal mental health issues. Theoretically, that could be a good idea, but the United States did that, and it didn't go so well. In fact, like institutionalizing this and sort of forcing people against their will into treatment centers it's just a prison, and it seems like maybe just due to, I don't like human nature, but due to like specifically the American psyche and the way that Americans think about people with disabilities, people who are, for lack of a better term, crazy. We think that they're dangerous. And so as soon as anything bad were to happen at any of these mental facilities, if in 10 years or whatever, we propped them up. Good intentions, as soon as anything bad happened there, it'd be fucking lockdown time. People would be terrified if they lived near one. Like, people would already be terrified if they lived near one. Like, there's no way that our society could bring back mental institutions and not have it just be fucking eugenics factories. It's fucking unfortunate. It really is, because I think that inpatient treatment and in rare instances, maybe folks having to go there against their will would be good for society, for those people, for their families, because now those people are getting help, and maybe their family is less concerned about their well-being. But in the United States, it would go full One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, like immediately. As soon as you fucking break ground on that shit, it's already full One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And, I had mentioned that, the UK has comprehensive healthcare. I don't know how people are being treated if they're in inpatient facilities for mental health in the UK at taxpayer expense, or mostly taxpayer expense. I don't know. Maybe it's horrifying. I don't know. Anybody know? Who knows? But I know that if the United States does it, as Gavin Newsom is suggesting, as Mayor Matt Mahan of San Jose is suggesting, as Mayor Daniel Lurie of San Francisco is soft pedaling a bit more, because he's the mayor of San Francisco versus the mayor of San Jose. But they're all suggesting that we start forcing people that are homeless or who have mental illness into a place that the government tells them to go. And it ain't housing, right? It ain't a studio apartment with a bathroom and a kitchen. It ain't even a hotel with a kitchenette, right? Sometimes they just force you to sleep on a cot in a warehouse. So Americans doing what they just suggested would be horrifying. And with that, we're going to go into red light. Everybody, thanks for listening to this episode. If you're here at the end of the podcast, go ahead and go to patreon.com/echoplex or eplex.store, and you can get the whole live show, audio and video, sent to your inbox. And it shows up a day before. I know that we're sunsetting this show for the next episode, but the Patreon, you also get early access to our other shows. You get the Plex early, you get Down Ballot early, you get the video, not just the audio, of Used to Be a Spy. And our upcoming show, Cast of Characters, is going to be released on Patreon, along with all of our research documentation and stuff for it. It'll be released on Patreon before it comes out as a podcast, or Patreon and eplex.store. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, people, for sticking with us through all of this. And we're going to move on over to red light. So I'm going to change the color of the lights and change the content of my beverage. And we'll see if I run out of stuff to mix my vodka with before I run out of energy to do the show. See everybody in red light.